he was really apologetic, and he had been like that for years. And I had seen where he had changed his life around completely. And so he was very apologetic. Where I was surprised was that he also thought that I was doing it to get back at him all these years later. He was like, "Are you just doing this to hurt me? Because I've already been hurt and I already feel terrible. I've lived with this for 16 years too in silence, and it's been killing me too." And so where I was really shocked at his answer was that he thought that I was actually doing this to hurt him. I decided to confront my abuser because I knew that my story mattered. And I knew that if I shared my story with one person and it supported one person, I would do it again and again and again. And when I realized I wanted to share my story, I also realized that it meant that I needed to talk to my abuser about it. Because when I was ready to share my story, we had had conversations before, and he had apologized for what had happened, and we had talked about it a little bit, but we had gone on for 16 years like nothing had happened. And when I realized I needed to share my story, I also needed to hear from him and really see where he was at, because my abuser was someone who I saw growing up every single day because it was a family member. And so I knew that what he was doing today was a night and day difference from when I knew him back when he was abusing me. And because of that, I knew that I needed to talk to him and see where he was really at, not just what he's doing on Facebook, what he's doing on Instagram, what he's doing to serve other people right now, but like, where are you? Like, and so we haven't talked about the abuse at all, really for 16 years. So I went and I confronted him because I knew that I wanted to share my story publicly, and I knew that he got to hear why. Because it wasn't about hurting him, it wasn't about getting back at him. For me, it was because I knew that I needed to share my story publicly to serve others who were in my shoes, because I never wanted them to go through 16 years of silence and not talking and saying it out loud. So that's really why I decided to confront him, is because I really truly believed that I needed to share my story publicly.
I decided to confront my abuser because after the incident had taken place, it was with my uncle, I was given no choice by my parents but to put a report into the police, even though I didn't want to, because at the time I believed that we didn't need to, because I really believed with my whole heart that I would speak to him, or my parents would speak to him, and he would say, "I'm really sorry, I've made a terrible mistake," and I could just simply never see him again. That was my belief. So they made me go to the police, which I did, even though I didn't want to. And then after that, there was a 2-year gap between when the incident happened and when the court case took place. And in that time, we lived in a very small town, and there was only a couple of places to go in the evening. So if you're out, everybody's out. And I would bump into him often, and he would say things to me like, "You're crazy, why have you made all this up about me?" He was a very well liked man in the town, and I was a runaway, a troubled teenager. And I remember saying to him in front of people, please just, all I need you to do is acknowledge that it happened, and we don't even need to go to court. We don't need this. I just need to hear it from you to me. And he just looked me dead in the eye and said, you're crazy. Um, and that was really hard because I didn't want it to go to court. And the reason I confronted him was because I was trying to avoid that, because it was causing so much stress in my life, because a lot of people were very against me because they thought I was trying to ruin his life. And I was getting physically and verbally attacked often. I had someone try and run me over and someone bite a chunk out the back of my arm because they were trying to protect him. So I just wanted it to stop. And I just thought, well, if you just tell me, I can tell my parents, and then this is all over and we just don't need to do this anymore, So my reason for confronting him was to stop it going to court, because I just wanted it all to end. So that was my reason.
So my reason for confronting my abuser was that we were high school sweethearts, and we had essentially gone through several years together peacefully. However, once we had broken up, due to what he had done to me, I heard that he had done it to several other people, and I wanted to put a stop to it. I decided that it was time for me to speak up and say something to him so that maybe I could save somebody else's sanity and life and comfort. And I unfortunately didn't get the results that I wanted, but I do know that he is married now, and his wife reached out to me. And I don't know why. I never took that responsibility on to figure out why. But I do have some ideas that because he is still happily married, that she is safe.
False. I actually had the opposite of where people said it's been 16 years, don't talk about it, it's over, you don't have to worry about it, don't tell anybody, don't talk to him, it's over.
False. I was discouraged from speaking to him because we had an upcoming court case. So I was really discouraged from speaking to him. But yeah, I wanted to speak to him because I was trying to just get the truth and bring the whole matter to an end.
True. I was with friends. I had encountered him kind of chancely, and they said that this was the time and that I needed to speak up.
So he had come to visit many times before, and we had acted like we were all good. Everything was fine with my whole family. We would go on family vacations and never bring up anything from the past and act like we were all good and happy. But I knew that this particular time he came to visit that I wanted to talk to him. So I had written him before, and I had kind of prefaced it. I just said, hey, I really want to talk about what happened between us when we were kids. And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, look, like, you're coming and I want to talk to you in person about this because it's really important to me. And so beforehand, I had talked to my dad about it. I had talked to some friends about it. I had talked to some other people telling them that I wanted to share my story publicly. But I was actually so nervous to actually talk to him about it because we had just acted like it was okay for so long that I didn't even know what I wanted to say to him. And so once he got to town, I ended up asking him questions that just came to my heart. So
I confronted him. It was when I bumped into him, and it was really desperate. If I'm honest, it was in desperation, because the way he was speaking to me made me even doubt myself. So it even made me doubt the truth, what had happened, because of the way he looked at me and the way he would just look straight at me in front of everyone that we knew and just say, you're mad, you're completely mad, I can't believe that you would do this to me after everything I've done for you, blah blah blah. Because he helped me a lot when I left home at a very young age. He sort of came into my life, befriended me, befriended my friends. So I confronted him when I bumped into him, and it was really out of complete desperation. Just for him, all I needed was him to say, yes, it happened, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And really that would have been enough, but that didn't happen.
So I confronted my abuser at a very inconvenient time for him. I ran into him after not seeing him for about, I want to say 7 years, and it was his wedding day. And he was extremely excited to see me and gave me a hug, and I was extremely uncomfortable. And I immediately went into defense mode and said, absolutely not. You cannot treat me this way. Do you remember when X happened? And it took him back. But he said, no, I don't. And I said, that's on you. And we ended the conversation there. But it turns out, as I was distressed, my little town is 6 degrees of separation. Somebody knew the brother of the bride and went and told her what had happened. So that's kind of how that went down.
Confronting my abuser made me feel really confused. When I had sat down with him, we actually had a really interesting conversation about what had happened and what was going through his mind and how he could see me that way as a family member. And so when I heard his side of the story of just not having people in his life to tell him what was the right thing to do and what was okay sexually, what was not okay, and not having like a man figure in his life, it made me really confused at, was he wrong? Was he right? Because for so long, my own mom said that it took 2. And so when he shared his side of the story, I almost like wanted to have like empathy for him or like understanding for what had gone on. But after a while, I realized like, yes, while I can forgive him, while I can see what happened, it still wasn't okay. And so that took a few weeks afterwards. Like I was really like off for the like next few weeks. Like my fiance now noticed, he's like, what is going on with you? I was like, I don't know. Like I just felt really like a weird feeling of like, should I continue to share my story when this is probably going to hurt him? Because he had some things in his life that, you know, growing up didn't have people around to show him what was right and what was wrong. And so I was just really confused afterwards what had really happened, if it was my fault. And at that point, I think I was still believing a little bit that it was my fault. And so I was just really confused until weeks later when I was like, okay, I don't have to take this on as my fault, and I don't have to blame myself anymore. And I can acknowledge that it wasn't okay, but I can also forgive him because it's only hurting me. And I can go forward and share my story, and I don't have to use his name because I know that he's one click away from people not listening to my message of healing and freedom and going to click on his name on Instagram or Facebook and sending him hatred messages and getting mad at him, when the real thing is like we get to heal ourselves, and that's what matters. And that's what my message is. And so I actually was really clarifying afterwards to realize like I don't have to actually share his name, but I can still share my story.
Confronting my abuser just led to more confusion on my part. I was already confused as to why this situation had happened and how it had happened, because he had become the adult in my life that I trusted, and I thought he was showing me how I should be treated, how I had 2 fathers beforehand, a natural father and a stepfather, and both relationships weren't great. So when he came into my life, I put him on a parental pedestal, and I thought this is how I should be treated. And he trusted me, he gave me responsibility, something I'd never been given before. So I really thought he was amazing, and I really thought he was showing me what a parent, and that should be friendship and leadership in a parental sense. And he was my cool uncle, and I thought he had my best interest at heart. So it was so confusing anyway. Person that had spent 2 years making himself a massive part in my life, befriending all of my friends, being this cool, amazing person who I adored, it was so confusing because he would then look at me and I just thought, I just don't even know this person. And now I've lost the person I thought I had. So it was just another adult parental loss in my life, as well as complete confusion because he told me I was crazy and I made it all up. So super confusing, really hurtful, and loss. I think I grieved a lot and I was in chaos afterwards, really, over the loss of the relationship I thought I had with him. So yeah, it was very confusing.
I was as well confused, especially because of the reaction I got when he completely denied anything that had happened. And I was very clear to him in my speech and in my actions that I was not okay with him. And he ignored all of those signals. However, it only confirmed that I was not to blame because he continued to act in a way that was gaslighting, in a way that was manipulative, in the ways that he was in the entire relationship. So while I was in distress right after, I felt that I had done my best to convey my actions, and I had to then lay it to rest.
True and false. True because he was really apologetic and he had been like that for years. And I had seen where he had changed his life around completely. And so he was very apologetic. Where I was surprised was that he also thought that I was doing it to get back at him all these years later. He was like, "Are you just doing this to hurt me? Because I've already been hurt and I already feel terrible. I've lived with this for 16 years too in silence, and it's been killing me too." And so where I was really shocked at his answer was that he thought that I was actually doing this to hurt him. Because for me, that was out of like my mind completely, because I knew that it was never about me sharing my story. It was about the women who aren't able to take a stand for themselves. And so for me, it was always about the women who had come to me sharing their stories and wanting to support them even more by sharing my story publicly, because I had shared my story here and there with a few friends. But when I knew I wanted to take it publicly, I knew that it wasn't even about me anymore. It was about me supporting others through my story. And so I was really shocked that he, thought it was all about me hurting him.
False. I really believed with my whole heart that he would just turn around and say, "I'm so sorry. I just made a complete mistake. We should never have done it." And then just accept that I never wanted to see him again. I was convinced. I told my parents that even as they were phoning the police, I was begging them not to. And I was saying, "You don't need to do this. You don't need to do this. You just need to speak to him. I know him. And he cares about me and he wouldn't do this. He wouldn't mean to do this to me. You just need to speak to him and he'll say, 'I'm so sorry. I've made a terrible mistake.' And then I just don't need to see him again. And that's it." And it just couldn't have been further from the truth. And I still, to this day, can't really believe that he reacted in another way, because it's just not the person I thought I knew.
False. I thought that he would bat an eye or react in some way, shape, or form. I was very young and I was very optimistic and I was very hopeful. And I thought that in confronting him, there would be a reaction of remorse. And there wasn't in any way, shape, or form. And looking back, and now that I'm older, I realize that it just confirms what had happened in the past. So if I had had a different perspective, maybe I would have gone in expecting him just to repeat the past. And then it would have been better for my mindset, but that's not what happened at the time. And I was very upset.
The outcome of confronting my abuser was yeah, like I said, really confusing in the beginning, because I was like, okay, do I share my story? Do I not share my story? And it wasn't for a few weeks later when I was like, and so when we left the conversation, actually, I was like, okay, I'm going to say it was you. You know, you can either share your side of the story or not, but I'm doing it. Like I can't not do this. I see women all the time coming to me, like sharing their story, and I cannot not serve them, and I cannot not tell my story. And I felt like I was like hiding behind not wanting to share my story, just to not hurt the two people that have hurt me the most, which was my abuser and my mom. And so when I left, I told him that I was going to share his name. And a few weeks later, I was like, you know what, actually, because it's not about me, because it's not about him, actually sharing his story would actually do more harm in my case, because he is on social media, because I know that we like to go straight to the abuser sometimes instead of healing ourselves, because anger is a lot easier to deal with sometimes than just actually confronting where you're at in your healing journey and focusing on you, because we want to look towards other people to put our sadness and our anger on. But at the end of the day, like, we are so important to have forgiveness and freedom from the abuse that, yeah, the weeks afterwards, I really had a lot of peace from it and a lot of understanding. And so when I came back and told him that I was actually not going to share his story, his name, he was actually really grateful and really understood that it wasn't about me getting back at him. So I had a lot of peace actually after confronting it. And ever since then, yeah, it's been a pretty uphill journey, I would say. Yeah.
The outcome of confronting my abuser was initially chaotic. I felt distressed initially. It was very odd that a complete stranger knew the brother of the bride and did end up telling the bride what had happened to me. Again, it was typical 20-year-old behavior. I hate to say it, but it was, in which there was a lot of chaos, a lot of drama. Um, it 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 went down in a way that I probably should have expected. Um, However, I look back and I say, wow, 20-some-year-old Carly had some chutzpah and really spoke her truth. And looking back, I don't regret it in any way, shape, or form, especially because it obviously had rocked the boat. And I didn't get peace from it, but I knew that my story wasn't something that wasn't going to be silenced anymore.
The outcome of confronting my abuser was that it made the time between when it happened and the court case taking place just living hell, because it then turned, I lived in a very small town, even more people get involved. When you're in a small town, everybody thinks that everything is their business, and I just had people that they hated me. I was the young, troubled, runaway girl full of emotional baggage, and he was an upstanding man of the town, very well liked, very well thought of. Everybody thought he was amazing, and why would I try and ruin his life after he had helped me after leaving home? So really, me confronting him probably just caused more chaos, because 17-year-old Emma didn't show up that well. I wasn't troubled. I didn't know how to handle myself. I didn't know how to handle my emotions. I left home at 15. I was very young. And Emma now showing up, confronting him would be a different story. Emma now also understands that even if I went and confronted him again, I'd still get the same answer. And since then, he's gone on to frequent and spend a lot of his time with considerably young women, 16, 17-year-old women. So the age hasn't changed for him, and the behavior has continued. So I now know I wouldn't get a different answer. I'd get the same answer.
Ultimately, it did bring me peace, just because I knew that it was something that was in the back of my head for so long. Like, why did he do this? And I knew if I wanted to become abuse coach and speaker, that it would actually be an amazing experience if I was able to actually hear from him what he was thinking. And so it actually gave me so much more understanding of how that dynamic worked, how that happened. And so for me, it was like, okay, I went through this for a reason with this person in particular, because I know that I get to support others who don't understand why a family member could see them that way after years of being family members, of like growing up, playing together, having fun, like trusting each other, and how it could turn sexual. And so for me, what the piece was is that I understood where he had come from, not that it was okay, but that I get to support other women even more and even better now, being able to have the understanding. And so for me, it just gave me a lot of peace of, yeah, that I went through that for a reason. And I think that sometimes we think that we're broken after going through something like that, but it actually made me realize like how much stronger I am and how much stronger I am to go out and also serve others through this time of healing. So yeah, it did give me a lot of peace.
Initially, it definitely didn't bring me any peace. It just brought me further abuse from others who weren't even that close to me in lots of instances. It brought a lot of violence towards me, a lot of verbal and physical violence that essentially drove me out of my town and became the catalyst for me being on a very rocky road and getting into further vulnerable situations, which ultimately led to me being violently raped by a complete stranger 2 years later. So really it was the catalyst for a very, very turbulent few years, where my life became completely unsafe and I became very vulnerable and I didn't even know I was. In the longer term, I think I found peace in as much as I know that I did everything I could at the time to give him every opportunity to level with me, and for me to then go to my parents and say, please, let's just call this all off. But ultimately, I suppose he didn't trust that if he did tell the truth to my face, that I would go to the police and drop the court case. And his reputation was his priority. So I'm guessing the fear of potentially going to jail was his overriding factor in not giving me that peace that I needed, which was the basic validation of what had happened, and not gaslighting me and making me feel like I was crazy and that I had destroyed his life. His reputation, his life, how people viewed him was his priority, and he prioritized that above giving me what I needed back then that I believed would have given me some peace, but I didn't get it. But now I have found it, and I also have found it in as much as I now have seen his behavior over the last 20 years, and people have told me that he's often been seen with younger girls, and it's made me realize, I suppose, that I saw him through rose-tinted glasses as a young person, and as an older person he's probably not somebody I would associate with, because now I realize that when you're considerably older than a 15, 16, 17-year-old, why would you hang around with them? It's just something I didn't see at the time. So I have peace now in the learnings that I've had over the years, but it didn't come from confronting him.
Yes. So initially, I didn't have peace in that I expected that he would have said something to the extent of, yes, this happened. But ultimately, I have decided that his actions are for him to reconcile with, and that it is not my job to teach, and it is not my job for him, or it's not my responsibility anymore. It isn't. And what he does is what he has to reckon with from now on. And I have found peace in relinquishing my responsibility.
I think it depends on where you're at. And to be honest, I would encourage you to focus on yourself first, because you are your main priority. And so when confronting your abuser, I think it comes after you really having your own healing, because you are worth that, for one. And for two, like, it takes a lot to be able to confront your abuser, and a lot comes back up. And so if you do it right after, or if you do it before you've had some healing and freedom yourself, it can be really painful to go through. And so, yes, while I don't recommend what I did with waiting for 16 years, because yes, I did do all those things. And was talking about drinking and partying and doing that stuff. And it really hurt myself and my body, because I did take it out on me. But I would also give it a little bit of time, in the sense of confronting them if you're in a, like, obviously a safe environment. If you have that time to really focus on yourself, realize that you are going to be okay. It's not a healing sprint, it's a healing journey. And so it's going to take time, but you are worth fighting for now. And so what that means is you get to focus on yourself first. And when it is time, when you are ready, yes, you get to confront your abuser if he's still around. And that's not for everybody even. Sometimes, like, we have to remember, like, that maybe we won't ever see them again. Maybe we won't ever talk to them again. But at the end of the day, like, yes, eventually you get to take a stand for other people that he potentially might be abusing, in the sense of confronting him and making sure that something is being done. But yes, like I said, you get to check on yourself first, because the time after the abuse is really a confusing, hard time. And just to let you know, like, you're not alone in that. We're all here today because we do care about what happens to you after the abuse. And we want to share with you that it is possible to stand up and confront your abusers, but make sure that you are ready first.
I echo really what Alisha says, in terms of, I wouldn't be comfortable to sit here today to recommend that you do or don't do, because as you've heard through this discussion, the results are so dramatically different, and the context around everybody's abuse experience is so different that sometimes it can be partially healing and confusing at the same time, and sometimes it can lead to more abuse, for example in my case, which it did. And definitely, I think it's important to know what you're trying to achieve from confronting your abuser as well, and that's only a question you can answer. And also, what I remember is that I was, especially quite often, abuse can happen when people are young and you haven't really found your feet yet, and you don't really know yourself yet as well, which adds to the problems within this area, because we're not even aware of ourselves. So we often look outward for validation and outward for answers. And in my case, certainly, I went to the very person looking for him to fix it, almost, because I just thought, if he just says this to me, it will fix it. So I was looking to the very place that had hurt me for the solution. And then when I didn't get it, it was like a double down on all of the emotions that I already had that were so confusing. So take time for you, seek some professional help and support. And sometimes we go to the people that we love and trust for support, and sometimes we get nastily surprised that that's not where we're going to get that help. So my advice before considering confronting your abuser, unless it's happened immediately and the police are involved, which was my case, they came to my house, they took my bedding, they took everything. So confrontation of the abuser sort of can happen without you planning it. Then just get some help for you, and there is so much help out there. There's therapists, there's organizations, there's charities, there's coaches, there's mentors, there's a lot, and there's something different for everybody that works for everybody, and there are resources out there that you don't even have to pay for. So don't always look. Family and friends are great, but maybe that isn't the whole part of where you're going to find your support to get to where you need to get to decide what's best for you. So sit on it. If you have the opportunity, if the police are involved, you probably won't get that opportunity. And I'm sorry, because so much gets taken away from you when you've already had things taken away from you. Your choices just suddenly get ripped from you, it feels like. But still take time to sit on it, work through it with someone that can help you work through what you're trying to achieve from it, what you will do in either situation. So talk through the both scenarios. What if it goes this way? What if it goes that way? Work out a self-care plan. Who's going to be around you to support you straight after that conversation, and how are you going to look after yourself after that conversation, would be my advice.
I would say everybody's situations are drastically different, to just echo on everybody else. And it really depends on where your mental headspace is. Have you sought help? Have you told people that do believe you? Because that's the key. Now, I didn't have all of that support when I confronted my abuser, and I didn't have people that believed me until that random stranger showed up that night and did believe me and confronted the brother's bride. So what I would say is that you need to have the inner strength before you decide to go forward one way or the other, because it's never truly emotionally safe unless you have a plan, unless you are okay with either outcome, unless you understand that you might not be believed, which is unfortunate because it's never your fault. Never.
If you decide ultimately to confront your abuser, then you get to realize that you are strong enough to do it. And you're not broken from your past. It's actually made you stronger. So whether it goes well or whether he continues not to believe what happened, you know that you are ultimately strong enough to go through whatever happens next. And so my advice would be to really take the time, like I said, for yourself first, then go into it, maybe even having people around you that love you and are there for you and know what's going on. Because oftentimes, like, this whole process of healing from abuse can feel so lonely. You can feel like you're the only one going through it, because oftentimes we're told not to talk about it. And so we go through this silence for so long that when we go and confront our abusers, we think we have to do it alone, but you don't. So if you have someone who's on your side, if you have a support system, they can either go with you, they can be there in the car, they can be there somewhere with you, to know that you have people around you. You no longer have to do life on your own. And so you get to choose to have that community in your life that is going to support you through this time. And so, like Emma said, like, whether it's a coach, whether it's a family member, whether it's a mentor, whoever it is, know that you get to bring someone with you. Because yes, while I did it alone, it went pretty well, but I also know that, like, afterwards I was like, did he really say that? Did he not say that? Because it's very emotional time. And so I think that there's a lot that he said that, like, went over my head, because I was just like, I can't believe I'm having this conversation. And so having someone in that room might have been really supportive to really mediate the conversation, or really just be there on my side to stand with me. Because like I said, we're stronger together. We're not alone anymore. And so that would be my advice, is to have a support system to go and do that with you.
Yeah, my advice to anybody that does decide to confront their abuser, really just following on from what I last said and what the other girls have said, is when this happened to me, it was over 20 years ago, and the internet wasn't really a thing. And now it is. And there's so much support out there, and the power of being in a room or a group of people where you share your story and they look at you and say, I get it, is so incredibly healing and powerful and validating. And what it does do is it helps you stand in your truth, because when abuse happens, it's very easy to question whether something's even happened sometimes, right? And even though we know the truth, especially if we then go and confront that person and they look at you and basically tell you that it didn't happen and you're crazy, it's a very confusing time. So the more we are assured and the more we stand in our truth and we know it doesn't matter what anybody else says, I know the truth, the more we can stand in that and stand firm in that inside ourselves emotionally, then the better the outcome will be for any conversation you decide to have with anybody at any time. And really, for me, the strength in that has come in community, in connection with others that understand your story, that don't judge you, that just stand next to you and say, I get it, you're valid, I hear you, I see you, I feel you. So working on yourself and creating that circle around you, whoever that is, and quite often it's people that have been through something similar as well, you will find that strength in that space. That will really give you an enormous amount of strength to go forward and have whatever conversation you decide to have with whoever you have, no matter the outcome. You know your truth and you can stand in that and you won't be knocked over so easy. So the stronger you are inside, the better. But in order to get that, I personally have found the strength has come from standing alongside others who just say, I get it and I'm with you. And that helps me to stand in my truth that much firmer. And now it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what anyone says to me. I don't need anyone to validate me now. I know what happened and that's all that matters.
I just have to start out with saying you are not alone. This unfortunately happens to several women and men around the world. And know that you are not alone, because it feels very lonely at first, because we are shamed, we are silenced, and we are questioned. However, there are so many resources and people and places that you can go to make it better. And I echo other people that it isn't always family and friends. It's usually those that are in these support groups of survivors that get you and understand where you're coming from and can be empathetic, not just sympathetic, but empathetic. And I have to say that if you decide to confront your abuser, realize that you've done something that many people probably, other than our panel and several other women, it's very, very, very difficult. It's very difficult. So know that if you get through it on the other side, you've done something beyond amazing. If you just, regardless of the outcome, regardless of whether he believes that you are a crazy person or believes that you stand in your truth, you have to realize that you've done something that is true to you and true to what you believe. And that is amazing.
Hi, my name's Alisha and I'm a survivor.
Hi, I'm Emma and I'm a survivor.
Hi, I'm Carly and I'm a survivor.